Las Vegas, Nevada. Oh my, it has never looked prettier than it does this evening. Site of UFC 259, just the seventh card in UFC history to feature 3 title fights stacked from top to bottom. History can be made tonight. Some of the biggest names in the sport competing, and we shall talk about them all right here on this very special edition of Ariel and the Bad Guys. Sit back, relax, strap on your seatbelt. You've never been on a ride like this before. Welcome back to a brand new edition of Ariel the Bad Guy right here on all the platforms. I'm Ariel, and that's the bad guy, Chael P. Sonnen. And Chael, I don't know if you know this, it is fight night. It is just the 7th card in UFC history to feature 3 title fights on the same card. It is UFC 259. It is Israel Adesanya moving up to 205 pounds to fight the champion Jan Blachowicz. It's Amanda Nunes defending her women's featherweight title against Megan Anderson. It is Petr Yan defending his newly won bantamweight title against Aljamain Sterling. I am excited, my friend. How about you?
I am fired up. I'm in a good humor. Ariel, I have a very rare prediction for you. So look, we're going to have a little fun doing the pre-show, right? The card we're all looking forward to. I predict for you, the most fun is going to come post-show because I believe with an Adesanya win, things are going to light up between he and Jon Jones.
Oh, so wait a second. Usually when we do this show, final 30 seconds, you give us the main event prediction. Did you just give us the main event prediction in the first 30 seconds of the show? Is that what just happened?
You know what? No, I actually have a lot of thoughts, and I will hold that thought for you. What I am saying is in the world of if Adesanya gets a belt around his waist and a microphone in his hand, I just think that post-show, I mean, whoever predicts that the post-show is going to be the most fun. Look, it's been a very dramatic week. You and I are going to cover that. I'm just saying, stand by. If there's still a lot more to come. That's my prediction.
Okay, yeah, no, listen, when you got big names like this, big stakes like this, title fights galore, there's going to be chaos afterwards. And I think that's part of the reason why we love this crazy sport so much. So yes, I agree with that. And we will finally get your prediction at the end of this program, but let's not give it away just yet. Do want to mention to everyone, it's a loaded card from top to bottom. You got the prelims on ESPN Plus, then on ESPN beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern, then the main card at 10 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. You got Dominic Cruz, for God's sakes, on the prelims. You got Joseph Benavidez as well. We'll touch on some of those fights, but we have to start with the main event. Is he moving up to 205 all week long, as we spoke about earlier in the week? The questions were surrounding his weight. Well, in the end, he comes in at 200.5 pounds. He told me on Tuesday or Monday, he said, hey, I might even come in at 193. Well, in the end, he was a little bit above that, but worth noting, second lightest ever behind Elvis Sinisek way back in the day when he fought Tito Ortiz. Mistake, smart, or much ado about nothing this weight?
Well, he failed. Excuse me. Let's not miss the point here. Israel Adesanya has now failed. He came out ahead of time. He said, I will weigh in at 193 pounds. Now, you and I know him personally, but we can share with the audience that Izzy's walk-around weight, what we call when he's not cutting, he weighs 193 pounds when he goes and competes at middleweight. Now, excuse me, he came out and told everybody, I do not believe in changing my physiology. I am not going to bulk up for the weight. He even compared himself to Jon Jones, who's moving to heavyweight, said it was a big fault. A big mistake for Jon to do it. So Israel Adesanya is either not in shape, he's either 7 pounds out of championship weight because he didn't make 193, or he tried to bulk up to contracted weight, was playing a little gamesmanship of 205, and he missed. Either way, for him to come in directly in between, walk around of 93, contracted of 205, and an even 200 is not good news for Adesanya.
Wow. Honestly, I didn't expect this from you, Chael. No joke. Like, I thought you would say, I like this. It's a little closer to 205. Jan's expected to be around 220. Again, without giving away your full prediction, did this make you think twice about how this fight is going to play out?
Oh, tremendously. Listen, I have had one epic fail, and I had it because I had it on ABC, but it had to do with Conor McGregor fighting Cowboy Cerrone. I predicted Cowboy Cerrone for the following reasons. In the history of fighting, if you ever have an athlete who tips the scale at the heaviest he's ever weighed, tear up your betting ticket because he's not going to win. And that's also true to the history of boxing. When Conor McGregor tipped the scale at 168 pounds, represented the most he had ever weighed, I thought it was going to be game over. Now, I realize that Conor flipped the script, but I'm bringing that to you because Adesanya, a champion of the world, just tipped the scale at not only the most he's ever weighed, which means his timing is off, which means his balance is off, which means he will get a little bit tired a little bit faster. Listen, that's just human logic, and that's the way it works. But he also tipped the scale at 7 pounds more than he told us publicly his goal was going to be. And my question is why? Did he try to lift weights, do games in the strength, drink the protein, and he just missed the weight? Or is he out of shape, Ariel? And I don't know the answer, and I'm not accusing of one of the two, but I will tell you, and please bear with me. I had teammates in my amateur wrestling days who had to make a certain weight class. Now, the reason they had to make the weight class is there was a byproduct built into that weight. They had to run a little bit extra. They had to eat a little bit better. They had to stay focused a little bit more to make the weight. If they did that, they could be All-Americans and national championship contenders. If they missed the weight class, they couldn't even make the varsity lineup at the University of Oregon. I bring that to you because making weight, even on accident, forces guys to have a level of discipline. Adesanya missed weight both ways. He did not make the contracted weight. He did not make what he said he was going to weigh, which is his fittest weight, which is about 193. And I only ask you, without passing a judgment yet, I'm asking a question: why? Why does he weigh 200.5 pounds and not 193?
This is tremendous. I mean, this is an incredible take on the whole weight situation. Thank you for this. I do want to ask you about a comparison he made earlier this week. He says he feels like this fight is going to play out similarly to Anderson Silva versus Forrest Griffin at UFC 101. You remember that back in the day, right? Anderson, 185 champ, moves up to 205 and just absolutely schools Forrest Griffin. Is he off on that one, or do you think there's a chance it could go down like that?
I see a lot of comparisons there. Anytime you're talking Adesanya, particularly with the movement, what we call the pull, which is an athletic movement, very hard to do. If you want to juxtapose that, Adesanya and Anderson Silva, I'm always open to listen. Ariel, excuse me, I'm a little bit remiss that you moved on so quickly. Okay. I am asking you a question. I realize you don't have to come to me with a history lesson and give me an example. But if you would just logically, as a fellow expert in the sport, it is a compelling question why Israel Adesanya missed his predicted weight by 7 pounds. I bring that to you because there's a reason. Is that reason that he was pumping the weight? Is the reason he never really weighed 193 and he's always swerved us and he's a lot bigger for middleweight than he's pretended? Or is the reason, as a byproduct, he hasn't got up early enough, he hasn't run enough miles because of the pandemic, perhaps he hasn't sparred enough rounds? There is a reason that he weighs 7 pounds more than he told us he was going to weigh. If you're training properly, if you're eating properly, you don't have a choice but what you weigh. Okay, you don't have a choice. It's calories in versus calories out. There is a reason that this man is 7 pounds bigger than he predicted. I'm asking you what the reason is.
Well, honestly, I don't have the reason from his mouth.
Speculate.
Okay, but here's the thing. I mean, I don't want to, just recklessly speculate, but there is a possibility, Chael, as much as it pains me to admit, he could have been swerving us a little bit. He could have been, hey, by the way, thank you. He gave us a lot to talk about this week, right? The 193 kind of stuck out there like a sore thumb. It was great for my interview. It was great for all of us talking heads. And so I don't mind it. But A, there's a chance he was just swerving us. B, what you said, when you talk about maybe not pushing yourself as much because you're moving up to a higher weight class, I'm reminded of BJ Penn. I think he's the most famous example. BJ Penn was the man at 155. He moves up to 170, UFC 94 to fight George St. Pierre. Chael, I worked on UFC Primetime, behind the scenes, in production. I watched every single minute of BJ Penn's training sessions. The man did not train for that fight. And I think part of it was because he knew he had 15 extra pounds. He didn't have to push himself. Is that a possibility? I got to be honest, Izzy doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. Now, Izzy's the kind of guy who has fought at heavyweight as a kickboxer. So he knows how his body reacts to being a little bigger. He knows how it feels. I don't feel like the 205 or 200.5 is that big of a deal. I thought the 193 was a little light against the guy. Like, imagine he weighed 193. Imagine come fight night, he was 195 and Jan was 220, 225. We're talking a difference of 25 to 30 pounds. That's a really big deal. So I like the 200. It seems safe. It seems significant enough for him to have that flex moment that he talked about being smaller. I can't sit here and say he missed weight or he messed up or he's out of shape. I'm just really intrigued to see how it all plays out because, again, like I said, second lightest ever going into a light heavyweight title fight. That feels pretty significant.
Okay, wonderful. And I can feel that I'm beating something here and you're ready to move on. I just want to make sure that my thought, at least, whether it's answered to my satisfaction, I want to make sure my thought is out there, because I am not declaring that 200 pounds is an inappropriate thing to weigh when you're competing at light heavyweight. What I am suggesting for you is that he missed weight, the weight that he predicted he would weigh, by 3.3 percentage, for 3.3 of your body weight percentage. Okay, it's a meaningful miss. And if you're running as many miles as you're used to, no, excuse me, if you're running as many miles as you're used to running, if you're eating the way that you're used to eating, physiologically, that's hard to do. So something changed. And I'm just leaving it at that. We'll discuss this tomorrow. Something's different. You don't just put on 7 pounds. That's it.
Okay, so things were going great for Izzy at 185, 20-0 in MMA, 9-0 in the UFC. By the way, this guy, 31 years old, Anderson Silva, made his debut at 31. He's about to fight in his 10th UFC fight at 31. Pretty remarkable when you put it in those terms. Do you think, and I know we're talking going into the fight here, and you could obviously change your answer afterwards, do you think it was a mistake to move up? Should he have just stayed at 185 and continued to dominate?
No, absolutely not. I think in the era of champ, if you want to be remembered that way and other guys are doing it, you've got to go out and compete within what the other guys are competing with. I don't think it's a mistake at all. I respect it fully. To something you brought up earlier, he has tested those kind of weights, even in his kickboxing days, all the way up to heavyweight. He's made it pretty well known that he's got a goal of John Jones. He can't get all the way to heavyweight, but he'll give up a weight class if John will come back down. Well, no, I think everything made sense there. And in all fairness, I don't understand why guys have to be locked into certain weight classes. In truth, these two weighed 5 pounds apart, Ariel. That is nothing. It's not worth mentioning. In most sports, they don't weigh people in. In track and field, you're either faster than the guy next to you or you aren't. I think that in this sport, it is a lot to do about nothing. I think the real tough guys will go compete with anybody. No, I don't think it's a talking point. I really don't. I don't think that he should get a big feather in his cap because he beat a guy that's 20 pounds bigger. So what?
Interesting. I mean, you just spent like 10 minutes talking about the weight and it was a miss and all this stuff. And now you're saying the weight doesn't matter.
No, excuse me. I'm asking why he weighs it. I'm not the guy that's coming to. No, Eric, please don't laugh because I will feel that you're missing this. A lot of people will talk about when one guy is bigger and they'll make this whole thing about the power. Well, he's bigger, so he obviously has more power. We can break the power down all we want. I would much rather see cardio and finesse. I would much rather see a guy within rhythm and balance, which is something Adesanya has. I can remember when I was a youth, Ariel. We took 7 weeks off in this. I wrestle all the time, but we had a 7-week break. When I would come back after those 7 weeks, being a little kid, I would grow 2 inches. I would be 10 and 12 pounds bigger. And on my first day of wrestling, I could be the state champion. It was like I'd never done it before. When I bent my knees and I went to get in a stance, my timing, everything was off. I was tripping over my own feet. This is something that the listener will be able to relate to. It's just something that happens with youth, but it's also the only example that I have to bring to you where gaining a few pounds or doing something different changed the sport. Adesanya missed the weight that he told us he was going to make by 7 pounds. I don't know why you're laughing about that. I'm not trying to say he's going to win or lose because of it. I'm just speculating as to why did it happen. He did not have the built-in byproduct of having to make weight, which would force him to put in extra miles, which would force him to eat better, which would force him to get to bed earlier. So I'm asking you, did he do those things? There's a reason he is bigger. I'm only asking why.
All right. Well, we'll find out after the fight. I do want to ask you about the setting. At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot was made of the big cage versus smaller cage. We don't really talk about that so much these days. Sure. I know this is a big sticking point for you. I know you're very passionate about the cage. Is he fighting in a smaller cage? That has to be in Jan's favor, right?
Sure. So there was a group of people that talked about big cage versus small cage. And you're right, that phenomenon was a little more about a year ago. That group of people was called nerds, okay? It doesn't make any bit of difference. I have fought in every cage there is, and so help me goodness, I don't know which is which. Okay, we're talking about the size of the cage. I fought 50 men for 5 world championships. Just to personalize this, I do not know who is orthodox versus a southpaw, but you will have some fighters that come out and make a really big deal about which leg a guy is leading. It really doesn't make that much of a difference. And there is a school of thought that for the wrestler, the small cage is better, and for the striker, the big cage. This was a big storyline with DC versus Stipe Part 3, started by our own DC, who thought the smaller cage would favor him. And I'm here to tell you, no disrespect, it doesn't make a bit of difference. The referee steps in, he gets out of the way. You guys got to fight within an arm's reach anyway. Any more than an arm's reach, you can't touch one another. Who cares how big the cage is? What was your question? What
No,
was
that
the
was
question?
perfect. That was exactly what I wanted. I was actually hoping that you would go on a rant like that. So thank you for that. Let me ask you this though. Would it behoove
Nerds.
would it behoove Jan to actually try to take this fight to the ground? Not known to be a great, grappler. We know about the Polish power, but considering Izzy's prowess on the feet, would it behoove him? And by the way, if he's thinking of taking Izzy to the ground, is that a mistake? Izzy just became a purple belt under the great Andre Galvao. He told me on Monday that he's got some tricks up his sleeve as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned. Can you actually foresee this fight going to the ground? People don't usually, Rob Wilkinson, way back in Izzy's debut, tried to, make it a dirty fight and bring the fight to the ground and had a little bit of success in that regard as well. Do you think that that would be smart for Jan?
I will offer you this, Ariel. The takedown in modern MMA is not near as important as the threat of the takedown. And to showcase what I mean, you don't have to go back any further than Poirier versus McGregor. Poirier got a surprise takedown in the first round, and nobody was more surprised that terrible shot worked than Dustin. However, it now made Conor think it might be coming, and it made him respect, which brought his hands down just a little bit and was what set up the knockout. So many people think that Poirier set that knockout with a hook followed by a straight. No, excuse me. He set it up by threatening the takedown, and I only bring that to you because as unlikely as Blachowicz is to have repeated success with takedowns based on the fact that Yoel Romero got one in 25 minutes, the threat of the takedown will be an element of surprise that could force Adesanya to react a little bit differently. The same reaction that Poirier got out of McGregor.
Interesting. All right. Well, later in the program, we are going to get
Interesting.
what?
Can't get an analysis like
I mean,
this.
this is for
You
you're
don't
on
know
fire.
anybody that can break down. What do you mean by you mean mind? Excuse me, mind blowing. That's what you meant to say.
Emoji with the fire coming out of his head. That's you right now. You are on fire right now. I'm sorry. And there's a part of me that wants to know how you feel about the other title fights on this card, because there's a lot to like. There's a lot to chew on. It's like a big, fat, well-done steak. You know what I'm talking? You ever get a fat, well-done steak, Chael? You just want to get your teeth into that thing. That's what this
I'll
card
send
is.
it back. Medium rare, I'll send it back.
Can we talk about Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson? Amanda has reached a point in her career where it almost gets to like, oh, okay, all the talk is, oh, where's the motivation? Where's the competition? All that's such a big favorite, minus 1100, plus 700 underdog. Does this play tricks on an athlete's mind? Like, does she strike you as the kind of person that will let her guard down, that will not train very hard because everyone's saying, this is fait accompli. That's French, by the way, fait accompli, which means like kind of like a done deal before she even steps into the cage?
No, she does not strike me as that kind of athlete. However, Ariel, if we were to go back through time, every big upset has the same story, which is the element that you brought in. Look, in all fairness, Amanda's personal life has been very public lately. From motherhood to becoming married, these things that changes you. Does that take your eye off the ball? I'm not accusing that it does. What I'm suggesting is historically for other people it has. When you start believing what people are saying about you, whether, oh, I'm terrible and I can't do this, or I'm so good I can't be beat, every upset is told the same way and has these elements. I do not believe that she's overlooking Megan Anderson, but I think that is a very fair question to understand. She's got to go out there and beat Megan Anderson, who, by the way, offers something that no other opponent has. Megan Anderson is physically larger than any opponent, albeit possibly Chris Cyborg. And Megan Anderson at least has the ability, because of the reach advantage, to make Amanda fight going backwards, which is something we've never seen her do.
Yep. And you saw it on the stare downs at the weigh-ins, at the press conference. There's a height advantage. The haters will say, look at the heels, look at the heels. There's clearly a height and size advantage here. Megan Anderson is a true 145er. Amanda Nunes, not so much. On Wednesday, or maybe it was Thursday's episode, because, we do two Ariel and the Bad Guys now. I want to let everyone know 2 times a week now, Wednesday, Thursday. I mean, the powers that be, so happy with our performance. They've asked for double dose of ABG. That's what we call it. Internally we call it ABG for everyone. You know what?
I'm so impressed with the way that you just gave us the rub right here midway through ESPN. I mean, really, that was brilliant, partner. Right? That was really well done. Can I also state for the record, if we're being fair with each other, I would not send the steak back. Look, I don't want it well done. I prefer that it's medium rare, but I'm not going to be a jerk to the waiter and send it back. I probably won't eat it.
You'd really not eat it? You would just keep it there?
I wouldn't want it if it was that cooked. Now, if it had like a demi-glaze or a sauce all the way down to a simple A1, something to add some juice to it. But I would like the viewer to know I'm not sending it back. That's a jerk move. I wouldn't do that.
What about ketchup?
I would do ketchup. That offends some people. I haven't the foggiest idea of why, but I have heard this phenomenon. So I just don't order it. If the ketchup is on the table, I'll tell you one that's overlooked is Heinz 57. That's a little bit harder to come by, but I wouldn't request that. I would request like a demi-glaze or an au jus just to look like a cool guy. I'd eat the ketchup though.
You say hard to come by, and that reminds me of Megan Anderson. Look at that transition. Look how I get us back on track. You talk about a situation that's hard to come by. Can you admit that I blew your mind earlier this week when I told you Megan Anderson is fighting on the final fight of her deal? How rare is this? I can't think of another time that a UFC challenger in a title fight is in the final fight of her deal. Now, you can interpret this in many different ways, right? You can say, hey, she's betting on herself. Hey, the UFC wants out of the featherweight business. How do you interpret this? Because can you tell the people, it's not just, I'm not making this up. This is as rare as like the steak you like to eat, right? I mean, this is supremely rare stuff. No one fights in a title fight in the UFC on the final fight of their deal.
This is a tremendously big deal. Okay, now you asked me how I interpret it straight up disrespect. I interpret it that the powers that be are saying, look, it doesn't matter because you're not going to beat Amanda anyway. Now, if you want to go as far as to say we're not keeping featherweights around, that sounds like a little bit of a stretch to me, but obviously you would have a clue in that direction. As far as we're not going to bother to get to the fax machine, and we're not going to bother to have the legal fill out this contract because we think it's a moot point anyway. Yeah, man. That's exactly how I interpret it. And in all fairness, if I was busy and there's one thing I got to overlook today, it's probably going to be re-upping Megan's contract in the face of she's going to have to beat Amanda for it to matter. You want to know how I look at it, though? That's how I look at it. I look at it as though it's a foregone conclusion that Megan is coming in second.
But could you imagine? Could you imagine she pulls off the upset? Imagine the leverage, because they're going to run it back. They'd have to run it back. I made the argument on Friday. Actually, a great thing to happen to Amanda Nunes would be losing this fight. She remains the 135-pound champion, but she finally gets a foil. She finally gets a fight that people are interested in, right? It's been a while now. I feel like it would actually be a blessing in disguise. Now, of course, she's not trying to lose this fight. Of course, she's not hoping for that. But could you imagine the leverage that one Megan Anderson has? Champion, free agent, just beat the GOAT. I mean, that's historic stuff. She's going to get a big payday. Now, it could also add to the pressure as well. But man, it'll be great on the back end.
Oh, you want to know who's going to appreciate that more than anybody? In all fairness, is Dana White. Dana will know the score. He'll know exactly what he did, exactly what he presented to you, and exactly that you got the upper hand, and he will show you that respect. Yes, this would be a very fun day for Megan walking into the boss's office in that scenario. I must tell you, though, because you used an interesting word. You used an interesting word of pressure, and perhaps that is exactly how it is. But if I'm personalizing this, no, I don't see that there is pressure. I believe when it's a foregone conclusion that everybody thinks you're going to lose, by the way, it's a world title fight, and you don't even have the courtesy of being the last fight of the night. I mean, it would seem as though a lot of pressure has been removed. There's two ways to look at it, but if I was to personalize, I would probably look at it the other. I'd probably go, well, I don't have a lot on me. I don't have a lot expected of me tonight.
All right. So we'll see how that plays out. One other title fight to speak of, Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. How about this, Chael? In his UFC career thus far, Petr Yan has never fought or defeated a top 5 UFC fighter in the bantamweight division. Meanwhile, Aljamain Sterling has won his last 3 against top 5 guys. Of the guys that Petr Yan has defeated, 2 right now are top 15 at 135. And so there is a case to be made. And I know that Aljo has been pushing this narrative. He's a paper champ. They pushed him. They gave him easy matchups. They wanted him to fight Jose Aldo coming off losses. This man hasn't earned it. He hasn't gone through the ringer like I have. Do you buy this or not?
It's a fascinating stat. It was one I was not aware of. It was one that I don't know that I fully accept because he certainly has beaten top guys in the world. But if he didn't beat them at the time, if he beat them in a different time, a lot of compelled by what you just said. In addition, you're talking about Petr Yan, but he hasn't been talking a lot of Aljo. He's also been talking a lot of TJ Dillashaw, the guy who was champion and never lost, but somehow the belt becomes vacant and he fills in the spot. I do see some problems with what Petr Yan doing. I think that it's very unfair that people are saying he hasn't beat the right guys, right? I mean, I think if you go in there against Uriah Faber and get your hand raised, if you go in there against, Aldo in any circumstance and get your hand raised. I think that you're owed a lot of credit, but I think that that's very fascinating. I like that Sterling brought it up because that tells me that Sterling's trying to talk himself into how come he can win. And that's a real thing you have to do as an athlete. So you got to sit down, you got to start looking at some brackets, start looking at some common opponents, start looking at what have I done that he hasn't, or what have we both done, but I did it better. Those are just the things that you have to convince yourself. And it sounds as though Aljamain Sterling has found a couple of things to believe in.
Chael, there was once a time, I think you know this, where the knock on Aljamain Sterling was he didn't like to get hit. And his team would talk about it. Even he alluded to it, that he was a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of getting hit. And he sort of fought in a tentative manner to avoid getting hit. Obviously, the name of the game is to not get hit. But, some guys don't mind it. Some guys do. And then he gets knocked out by Marlon Moraes. And I remember the way in which he got knocked out. I mean, it was vicious, scary stuff. He was out for quite some time. And I remember thinking, this might change Aljamain Sterling for the worse. Here's a guy who people said he didn't like to get hit, and he just got brutally knocked out. Like, he might never fight again. Well, guess what happened? He's now won his last 5 in a row, and he's looked better than ever. And it feels as though getting knocked out ended up being the best thing to ever happen to this guy because it took the pressure away. He experienced the worst. He came back, he was alive and well. He was healthy, no problem. And now he doesn't have that fear anymore. Is that a real thing? Is that a real phenomenon that a fighter can go through? You fear something, you experience it, it sucks, but then it actually makes you better in the end.
And I call it, Ariel, getting comfortable with success. Some people say they're afraid to fail. Some people say they're afraid to succeed. I see it in between where you have to be comfortable with success. And Aljo was one of these guys who's gone out of his way to get beat. He's contacted me for some grappling matches in Submission Underground. I just watched him over the holidays, roughly December 29th-ish. He went over and took on a guy named RBY, who, by the way, is the #1 ranked collegiate athlete in the country, represents Penn State. He went and took him on. Everybody in the world knew that Aljo can't beat this guy, that he's going to be brought in to sell tickets and this young kid's going to wipe the floor with him. And the young kid did not wipe the floor with him. He barely beat him. But the point that I'm attempting to make is Aljo himself knew that. He knew as the #1 ranked UFC fighter in the world, 135 pounds, I am not going to go and beat the #1 ranked collegiate Division I guy. However, I have a chance to compete with him. I have a chance to train for him. I have a chance to go make weight. I have a chance to go out, shake hands in the middle of a pandemic and find a good, hard competition. And he went out and did it. And when a guy stops being afraid to lose and instead looks for the performance over the outcome, that's when a guy is at his most dangerous. I really feel that Aljo, because of the examples that you brought up as the ones that I added to, is right now at his most dangerous.
The other thing people are saying is, hey, Jan has never fought a grappler like Aljamain Sterling. You know how I feel about Corey Sandhagen. That win over Corey Sandhagen last June, I mean, I think it will age beautifully over time. What a win, what a performance. That let me know that Aljo is for real. Do you subscribe to the notion that Jan has never fought anyone like Aljamain Sterling and this idea that Aljo needs to get the fight to the ground quickly because Jan will be dry like Sandhagen was and he'll be able to choke him out like he did Sandhagen? That's a real thing that Aljo should go after.
I'll tell it to you like this, Ariel. We're going to know in the very first round, okay? That takedown is going to be there or it's not. It's not going to come 8 minutes in. It's not going to come 12 minutes in. It's going to come in the first round or it's not going to be there at all. Getting him down, keeping him down, getting to the back or using the ground and pound. Those things are going to be there in the very first round. They are not going to come later. It is not that one Hail Mary shot that you could find 20 minutes in. Excuse me. That comes in the very first round. We are going to know in the first round if Aljo can get this thing down. We're going to know if Aljo can win this fight. This is not going to come from behind. This is not going to be a championship round method. If your team, Aljamain, okay, you got to get it done in the first round. And if you're asking me if this is a unique style, yes, I think that it is. If you're asking me to use the fact that it's unique as evidence that it's therefore going to work, no, I think that's a bridge too far.
And what about Jan? I mean, what impresses you about this guy? Because I don't feel like we fully appreciate him just yet. Maybe it's because he just won the belt. This is his first title defense. Maybe it's because he's not fighting guys who we deem top 5 worthy. I mean, he has fought some legends, right? Jose Aldo, Uriah Faber, but then you could say, oh, they were over the hill. Maybe he doesn't express himself as much, although he is coming out of his shell and speaking English. Why is this guy so? I think he's special, but I'd love to hear from you. Why is this guy so special?
Yeah, well, and he almost fought Cody Garbrandt. We remember that from
Hmm.
backstage, right? You recall that? And let me tell you about some of Jan's more youthful days, which was in the training room, where he went out to Brazil and was in the same room getting rounds with Renan Barão, and of course the great Jose Aldo, who was his idol at one point and went on to be his opponent at another point. But that's what the real greats do. They can separate themselves from their comfort zone. You know, imagine being Jan, living in one culture, in one country, and speaking a language, and then going to Brazil, having nobody that you knew, but you knew there was a great room there that was going to help bring you closer to your goal. I mean, that's something very special. He did this at 21 years old. 25 years old, he's the champion of the world competing with his former sparring partner. These are very real things, and these are very neat things. And yes, I think that Jan is very handsome. I think that he checks a lot of boxes in charge of being a star. I think that, sure, he could be a little bit more boisterous, but Ariel, being to walk out there and take on all competition, I mean, he's trying to do that right now. Him calling out TJ Dillashaw means a lot to me. I don't think that it means he's got his eye off Aljo. I think it means that he wants to be recognized as the best, that the belt isn't enough, that he wants people's opinion. He wants the eyeballs. He wants you and I and the minds of the fans to see him for what he is. And for me, those are the guys that go on to do something special. I think Jan's special. I think he's got his work cut out for him, but that's what the greats do.
Yeah, and part of the reason why he probably has his work cut out for him is because of Aljamain's grappling. I know you're a big wrestling mark. I don't mean, I don't mean a dirt sheet guy. I mean like collegiate wrestling. You just
Sure.
talked about it. I hear people calling Aljo unorthodox, unconventional, the funk master. What's so special about his wrestling? Like, why is he so funky on the ground? What's so different about what he does as opposed to, Mr. Wrestler X on the UFC roster?
Some of it is just athleticism. I don't find him to be outside of the box as
Hmm.
some people think, right? I mean, sometimes he's got a goofy hairdo, he's got good length, and he's lightning fast, but I don't see him as, say, like a Ben Askren type, where he's going to reach with his right arm instead of coming inside with his left arm. I mean, Ben Askren will fundamentally break some rules of wrestling and then take it all the way to the quarterfinals of the Olympic Games. I don't think that Aljo does that. I think he's very athletic. I acknowledge that he's quick. I will acknowledge that there's a rule that if you're out of what we call arm's reach, I mean, if you and I are squaring off, Ariel, and I put my hand out arm's reach, in the world of wrestling, that means you're too far away for me to attack. Aljo will break that rule. Aljo will make sure you're out of arm's reach and then change elevation and blast you anyway and somehow get you to the ground. But that just comes back to him being lightning quick. I don't know that I fully agree that he's funky, at least in comparison to, say, a Ben Askren.
Okay, fair enough. I like that
I
analysis.
don't. I really think that Aljo follows some of the basics really well. He also is a guy who's learned his own athleticism. He's learned some of those fast twitch muscles. He's learned to adapt some of those holds to make them personal to himself. But as far as him doing things, quote unquote, wrong, I don't agree with that. I think he's very fundamentally sound.
Well, what I like about this fight is it's probably the toughest of the three title fights to predict, at least in my opinion. And B, it feels like it's a referendum on both guys. We're going to find out if Petr Yan is for real, if he could beat a top 3-5 guy. And we're going to find out if Aljamain Sterling is finally championship material. We will find out tonight, and I can't wait to see it. All right. And now let us say hello to the voice of the UFC. We have made this a bit of a tradition here on the Ariel and the Bad Guy preview show. We like to check in with Jon Anik before he heads off to the arena. These days, it's the UFC Apex. He'll be calling the fights tonight with Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier, kind enough to join us. Jon, a lot to discuss on this card. It is stacked from top to bottom. We've been talking about it all show long. I do want to start, though, with the champion who, I noticed on Friday, you said that the card was built around Izzy. It's very rare that the card is built around the challenger in this case. It's a very unique situation, of course, because Izzy is a champion as well. But here's Jan Blachowicz coming into his first title defense. He's a father for the first time, a lot of motivation, a lot of people counting him out. It feels like the Izzy coronation. I know you spoke to him. You got a chance to see him, feel his presence. Do you feel like this is all a little too big for Jan? First UFC pay-per main event, all that stuff that comes along with it. How do you
with you guys, and I do believe on Friday I couched it and said Adesanya was one of the guys around whom this fight card was built, because it is a tricky situation. Normally, when I offer up that line, that distinction is reserved for the man or woman who is going to be the last to make the walk to the octagon. And of course, in this situation, it is Jan Blachowicz. I think if anything could work against Jan Blachowicz in this fight, it's just the opponent. he is a calculated killer. I mean, I think what he was able to do on Fight Island tells you that he can go into a setting, however big, and perform when the lights are the brightest. I actually believe, even though Adesanya certainly deserves the distinction as the betting favorite, that Blachowicz might have more ways to win. I mean, this is a credentialed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt that will have the size advantage. He believes he'll have the wrestling advantage. I think the most interesting part of this fight for me is going to be if and when Jan tries to take Izzy down, is he able to do so? But Jan is never keeping things close to the vest with us. I mean, he tells us he thinks it's going to end with a left high kick in round 2. I mean, he is more than willing to call his shot. I think the city kickboxing camp is expectant that Jan's going to try to wrestle early on. But I think the fight is properly priced. I think that we could easily be sitting around here Monday morning quarterback and say, man, Adesanya should have been minus 450. He's got a lot more tools and gifts on the feet. Question.
Hey, Jon, let me ask you a question, because I know you're pretty tight with Coach Ray Longo, as it has to do with his pupil, Aljamain Sterling. Some reports came out earlier this week that Aljo is not training with Coach Longo and Sarah Longo, that he's moved to Extreme Couture, but that was a conflicting report. I'm just wondering, what is the inside scoop on that? Does Aljo have a new team?
Well, he has a lot of the same bodies he's been working with for years. You know, Anthony Delemy and Dennis Bazooka are going to be in his corner, and these are bodies for him more than anything else. He has given those guys subtle cues in the grappling and wrestling realms that he would like them to maybe go to in the corner. But as Aljo told us, he's the guy who's the grappling. He's the guy who's giving out those imperatives. So Matt Serra is not here, and that's sort of the elephant in the room. And I think that's really a byproduct of COVID-19 and Aljo needing to tighten up his circle. He can only have so many bodies here. He does have Ray in the corner. Eric Nixick will be in the corner as well. And Eric's obviously been the guy who has been holding mitts for him throughout this training camp. But I do believe Aljo's entrenched here in Las Vegas. I don't think you're going to see him spend any big chunk of any future championship training camps if he wins the belt on Long Island. I think he's in Vegas for good. And he still wears that Team Sarah Longo badge loud and proud, but he definitely has, you know, opened up his training to the Vegas group as well.
Look at Chael starting to stir the pot here a little bit, trying to create a rift between the Sarah Longo and Extreme Couture team. Very interesting stuff there, Chael. I want to go back to the main event. We were kind of talking about the main event. For some reason, Chael went 3 fights down and started talking about Aljamain Sterling. I mean, Chael, holy smokes. Can you stick to the script here for a second? Let's talk about Izzy. Here's a guy who is the middleweight champion moving up to 205, and he comes in at 200.5 pounds. You got to see him in person there, second lightest ever as far as challenges are concerned in a UFC light heavyweight title fight. You think this will, again, Monday morning quarterback, mistake or really smart move on his part?
Well, I would almost throw it back to you and say, what exactly are you asking him to do? I know when he sat down with you, he said maybe 193 pounds. He looked big to me at 201.5 pounds. And the thing is, he's not moving up to 205 pounds with finality. He's going back down to 85, or at least 85. So if he were to move up to 205 with finality and progressively put on muscle, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, he's walking in there 222, 224 on fight night. But he just defended the belt at middleweight in September. So it's not as though he had all this time to methodically change his frame. So I think it's better that he's 201.5 pounds than if he were to have weighed in at 193 pounds. But even if he was 193, I'm not sure Jan can hold him down necessarily. So I'm not saying it's much ado about nothing, but unless this was a permanent move, there really wasn't much more weight that Adesanya, good weight, could have put on.
Yeah, and Jon, what about the disrespect being shown to Blachowicz? I mean, am I the only one noticing this? He's taken on a guy as a #1 contender in Adesanya who's never beaten anyone in the division, who's never even fought in the division. Oh, by the way, the public has Blachowicz as a 3-1 underdog. I mean, whether he likes it or not, this is an insult. Is he feeling that?
No, because I think he considers the source of the disrespect. Now, certainly if you look at the handle, most of the money has come in on Adesanya, and the betting line hasn't moved all that much. But I think 84% of the William Hill money, if I'm not mistaken, has been on Israel Adesanya. But there's no disrespect coming from City Kickboxing. You know, they don't see it as disrespectful that he's moving up when Jan's the champ and Jon Jones is not the champ. So they consider the source, which I would encourage all of us to do in any walk of life. Like they have the entire respect of the City Kickboxing camp, and again, Jan is so in his own lane and focused on being a new dad and his teammates and what he needs to do to succeed. Even when you see him on Embedded with the visualization and some of the things he's doing, Jan is so focused on the task at hand that I think fan or public disrespect is the last thing on his mind.
All right, let's switch gears now to the co-main event. Amanda Nunes defending her women's featherweight title against Megan Anderson. Megan Anderson is fascinating to me on multiple fronts. Former Invicta FC champion, comes into the UFC, bit of a rocky start to begin her career, but as of late, she's looked really good. She's won 2 in a row. And perhaps most importantly is the fact that she seems to be comfortable in her own skin. She's not dealing with the same kind of anxiety that she dealt with in the beginning of her UFC career. But now here she is fighting for the title for the first time in the UFC, massive stakes. Oh, by the way, the final fight on her UFC contract. I mean, there's a lot to deal with here as far as pressure is concerned. How's she dealing with all of this?
Well, I know when you guys did your midweek show, you talked a lot about the pressure that is on Megan Anderson, and you crystallized it in a very powerful way for me as I get ready to go to the arena here in a couple hours. I just didn't consider it as deeply as you guys did because she just doesn't seem focused or fazed by that at all. I do believe the extra time is something that is a great source of confidence for her. This fight was obviously delayed a few months. And I really think when James Krause and Megan keep talking about having fun and staying loose in there, that's the primary imperative from James Krause. She's not going to win this fight unless she just allows herself to get in that flow state and have fun. But I'm beyond intrigued. I mean, she definitely has a quiet confidence, maybe even more so than Felicia Spencer had in Amanda Nunes' previous title defense. She's 6 feet tall. We all consider James Krause to be one of the bright young head coaches in this game. So she has a lot of the tools. She is effective off of her back. So I'm encouraged. I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that she is north of plus 700 in some spots. You couldn't. Me, given the frame, given the head coach, given the extra time, and the rub that you talked about, her whole mentality, completely different fighter than the one that debuted against Holly Holm in 2018. But up here, she's just a totally different animal. So I hope it doesn't sound like promotional hyperbole. I understand how hard it is to beat Amanda Nunes, but I think Megan's got a great shot to do it. I really do.
Okay, but John, let me tell you this. I have seen Amanda Nunes do everything successfully except, are you ready for that? I do have an except. I have never seen her win a fight going backwards. Now, I've also never seen anybody pressure. I've never seen anybody force her to go backwards. You talk about Megan being 6 feet tall. Let's not forget she's also a full-size 145-pounder. I bring that to you because many girls don't even tip the scale at the contracted weight. Megan has to work with Tyler Mitten full-time as a nutritionist to get her weight down, at least in theory. She is the biggest body to step in there with Amanda, and at least in theory, is not going to be backed up. That alone, even if we see the Lioness win, if we see her win doing something we haven't seen before, that's compelling, correct?
I totally agree with all of that. And I think you could also argue with respect to Chris Cyborg that Megan Anderson is the strongest, physically, the strongest athlete that Amanda will have ever been in there with. And again, if you talk about some of these clinch situations where Amanda is just outstanding, how is that whole battle for underhooks going to go up against the fence? I'm very encouraged to see how Megan does. And I also said to her, and if you saw the press conference, you know, she's very dismissive of this as a talking point. But I think if Megan Anderson was walking out in front of 60,000 people in Australia for her first UFC championship opportunity, I don't know that that would be a recipe for success. You walk into this UFC Apex, it feels like a sparring session. It feels like a regional show. It feels like an amateur fight in a lot of respects. And I think that backdrop could pay dividends for Megan Anderson here in a few hours.
I think that's a great point. I would love to see how some of these fights would have played out under normal circumstances in front of crowds. And of course, under these circumstances, I think a lot of fighters are benefiting from the fact that, you know, it's just not as nerve-wracking when you're fighting in front of, I don't know, 10, 15 people in the Apex as opposed to 20,000 Marble Stadium. So that is a great point. Want to ask you about a guy you know very well. I mean, there's no denying you're friends with Dominic Cruz. It would be crazy to say that you're not, right? He's a broadcast partner. He's a longtime colleague of yours. What is it like for you to call a fight involving Dominic Cruz? And I'm assuming the same comes into play when DC fights, when Paul Felder fights. I mean, you get very close to these guys. You're in the foxhole with them, right? For 7 hours and build up days and all that stuff. Dominic is a guy I know you've known for quite some time. What is it like when you have to call one of his fights?
It's hard. I mean, it's emotional. I did learn, though, when Paul Felder fought Rafael dos Anjos recently and I was sitting on the couch, that's even worse. in retrospect, it's probably easier for me. Once the fight starts, I'm fine. It's when Dominic's making that walk that I feel a lot of emotions, because to your point, I've been working with him since 2013, and I've spent more hours with him than any of my broadcast partners prior, other than maybe Brian Stan, who insisted that we break bread together every single time we were on the road. So yeah, I mean, it's emotional, but once the fight starts, once the walk's done, I'm really just focusing on the mixed martial arts component to it. But for Dom, I never called any of his fights until he fought Henry Cejudo. So that was a unique experience.
Wow.
And Dom had to walk out with no crowd in Jacksonville, Florida, and he didn't so much as really have an optimal warm-up or anything. It just felt like a recipe for disaster. I feel like Dominic Cruz is one of the guys with all of these extended layoffs that could really be buoyed by the crowd, and it's not going to be there. So that's a big focus for Dom this time around, is to get the proper warm-up. He says his speed is still there, and I think given his footwork, that he's got to still be fast. And if he's not, I think you're going to see that pretty early on, and it'll be Casey Kenney's fight to lose. But he got in the requisite sparring rounds. It was a tough weight cut for him. He told me this morning, my body feels strong, but it was a tough cut. So that bears watching as well. But I'm just excited for him to have gotten through the camp, to be healthy. And what an opportunity for Casey Kenney.
Chael, we got to let John run, but I did want to follow up with this. First of all, I can't believe you've only called one of his fights. I feel like you've called like 10 of them at this point. That's a crazy little factoid. And number two, you really just made me miss Brian Stan. I haven't heard that name in a while. I love Brian Stan. He was so great on the broadcast. I hope he's doing well.
He's the man, and he is doing very well, and he's very happy professionally and personally. But I know he still has the itch, but he really taught me a lot about what it takes to prepare, famously telling me it's an open book test, John. You might as well show up with some notes. And
wow.
I haven't stopped writing since.
Well, we look forward to another call from you and the team tonight, John. Go do your thing. Thanks as always for stopping by.
Pleasure, boys. Thanks for having me.
All right, Chael. So that's great stuff as always from Jon Anik. By the way, can we reminisce a little bit about our bud, Brian Stan? Give me a good Brian Stan story. You fought Brian Stan, but maybe working with him. I really felt nostalgic when he said that name. It like warmed my heart. I haven't thought of Brian in a while.
You know what? I thought it was a very nice shout out. And yeah, I stay in touch with Brian Stan. He actually went into the world of finance, and he's the head president of Hire Heroes, which is a foundation. When I had my time, if I'm on Celebrity Apprentice, but that's the organization I was representing. That was the charity, Brian Stan's Hire Heroes. On his personal life, he just got married and is doing great. Still living out in Alpharetta, Georgia. I mean, I don't really know what other update to give you. He still sleeps too little. He believes if you sleep more than 5 hours, you're stealing from the government. He's an old military man. Do what you want with that.
No, he's the man. He is the man. We miss him dearly, and I can't wait till I get to become a U.S. citizen and vote for Brian Stan to become president, because I feel like he's got that in him, and who wouldn't want that man leading our country? Now, let's go back to Dominic Cruz, another colleague, a former colleague, if you will, a current colleague, whatever you want to say. Here's a guy who's fighting at 35, who's coming off that disappointing loss to Henry Cejudo, first non-title fight since 2014, first time on the prelims since 2014. I know this one might be tough because he's a bud, but does Dominic Cruz have
Okay. So you asked that question a little stronger than I thought you were going to, and I want to repeat your own words. Does he have another run in him for a championship? Ariel, that is very tough to do later in life. Another run to a championship. I do not know that he will be given the opportunity unless something odd happens, a short notice, somebody gets hurt. I believe Jan is going to go in a different direction, and whether that is a rematch with Sterling, should he be upset, at some point you have to insert TJ Dillashaw. You just have no choice. You cannot deny the Sandhagens for too long. Cody Garbrandt is going to have a say in things. All I'm trying to point out for you, for any name that I just mentioned, including Dominic's, to get opposite the champion, I think you'd have to short that. However, does he need to be? No. When you're the former champion of two different organizations, when you're going to be a future Hall of Famer, when you're a guy that took 3.5 years off and came back and proved to the world that ring rust doesn't apply to everybody. No, you don't have to have another run. Now, I would like to focus very shortly on tonight. Does he have enough tonight? And history says it goes to the younger guy. History says it goes to the new kid on the block with a little bit more momentum. And if you want to wonder how I'm saying that Casey has more momentum than Dominic, because if you look over the last 3 years, Casey's been in there 7 times and Dominic has been in there 3. History says this is Kenney's night, but Dominic Cruz has told history where it can take its ideas and what it can do with it many times. I'm not picking against Dominic. I'm not ready to talk title runs. I'm ready to talk tonight. But I think that Dominic belongs in this fight, and I'll leave it at that. That
is very fair. Can I be honest with you? When I saw this fight come through, I think MMA Junkie was the first to report it back in December. I was like, what? Dominic Cruz is fighting Casey Kenney, with all due respect to Casey Kenney, but not the kind of name that Dominic has fought over the past decade, right? And so I wondered, like, what does this man, Dominic Cruz, have to gain in a fight against Casey Kenney? And I suspect even as of tonight, there are fans who are thinking, oh, Dominic's just going to roll through this guy. Like, who's Casey Kenney? Dominic's the man. He's going to roll. So that would suggest he has everything to lose and not a lot to gain, because if he loses, people will be like, what? Dominic's shot. He's lost to Casey Kenney. What the heck is going on? Are you surprised? And can you tell the people just how rare something like this is? A former champion, a face of a division, a face of a weight class, taking a fight against a guy who has never even fought in a main event, let alone a co-main event. I don't even know how many main cards Casey Kenney has fought on. This is supremely rare stuff, and I do believe that Dominic Cruz should be applauded for just taking this fight.
It is a very peculiar booking. Listen, there was a number of fights through history when you have a star like Dominic and you bring in the new young guy to take the rub from him, send the old guy out to pasture, and then run with the torch. But excuse me, that's not how this fight's being used. This, to your point, is not a feature fight. A main card. I mean, look, in history, if this is the move, we're going to bring in the young guy to get the bounce. That's not the fight that you put the third of the night. So I think that it is a very unusual booking. What do you have for Dominic Cruz? Because, Ariel, I think you and I might have started this, but there was a little bit of talk of Dominic versus Aldo. I remember you and I talking a little bit of Dominic versus Frankie Edgar. And all of a sudden, we ended up on Casey Kenney in a non-featured match. And I fully do agree with you. I don't see what the play is here for either guy. And I don't have a problem with it. Look, if it's good, solid competition, good enough for me. I'm just interested in what's at stake. I mean, I can even remember back about 20 months ago, it was my own teammate, Ricky Simone, but he got brought in to take all the rub off of Uriah Faber, send Uriah back into retirement. It gave Ricky one of his only 2 losses of his career, but I bring that to you because at least you and I understood what was supposed to happen, what was the potential of happening. I don't know how these two ended up with one another. And I even asked Dominic that, hey, by the way, you got a problem with this guy? Is there something that I missed? Did this guy piss you off somewhere? Dominic said no. Yes. Whether that's the whole story or not, Ariel, that's what he told me.
Yeah, and he also said that he likes the fact that he's from Tucson, Arizona. That's where Dom is from. And he liked the idea of 2 Tucson guys fighting in a big UFC fight. It's the feature prelim fight. That's what he said, at least. That's what he said, Chael. That's what maybe he just, likes the matchup.
Yeah. What? Yeah, that's compelling. What?
Let me ask you about Islam Makhachev against Drew Dober.
Wait, hold on. I don't want you to move on from that. I mean, don't you agree?
Well, we don't have all day here. The fights are about to start.
The book. All right, please go ahead. Islam.
Yes, come on. Islam.
I forget whose show it is, right? Please go ahead. I'm just here. Go ahead. Islam Makhachev, please.
It's the A side versus the B side. Ariel and the bad guy.
One's the hammer and one's the nail, and we just found out who's which. Please go ahead. Islam Makhachev versus Drew Dober. What were you saying?
Don't you dare speak of this fight with that tone. Don't you dare. I know that tone. I know that tone very well, and I'll slap that tone out of your mouth. This is a phenomenal fight, Chael. Let me tell you something. This is a shoot right here. I am looking forward to this fight just as much as any of the title fights. No joke. That's no joke right there. That's no cap, Chael. That's no cap right here.
But why? But tell me why.
First of all, this is tremendous storyline. Islam Makhachev, first fight since Khabib's retirement, first fight since the passing of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, getting an opportunity now to be the heir apparent, the protege, right? This is his chance to take the baton from Khabib in his corner, right? This man has looked like mini Khabib for quite some time. Here's his first opportunity to tell everyone, yes, I am now in the same weight class as my guy Khabib, but I'm going to take the baton and become a champion. I love everything about that. Then you got Dober, who's looked amazing as of late, right? I mean, he has really retransformed his career. I think he's a major player, 155. And dare I say, he's being disrespected by the odds makers. it's, rubber meets the road. Let's see who's the man here. I love everything about it. So I want to ask you, is Islam the next Khabib, or is that a little bit of hyperbole?
I think Dober's the guy to go through. In all fairness, and we have seen Dober stub his toe before. However, it's with guys that don't possess skills that Islam has. Like matchup wise, I see this as very problematic for Islam. I really do. I think, and the other side, Islam, of course, gets to showcase himself. Islam is coming in on the path of what we call the vouch method. Okay, people don't all know who Islam is, but he has Khabib vouching for him. You always have to wonder when a guy who was the champion of the world and left vouches for a guy, is this very sincere? Is this because you felt the guy in practice and you respected and you wish the best for him? Or is part of it self-serving? Is part of it where you want a guy who looks up to you, who will call you sir, who will tell you you were the greatest ever, to be your heir apparent? Listen, I'm not judging, and in fairness, you and I will never really know. But the vouch method is the slow method. Eventually, somebody with a big name is going to have to step in there with Islam. Kevin Lee, as of the last year, is the only person to offer to do that, and he blew out his knee. And all of a sudden, you have Drew Dober, who, by the way, is pretty good at dealing with wrestlers. Oh, and by the way, hits pretty damn hard. I think it's a hard fight, and if Islam beats Dober, I am going to respect it.
I've struggled with this one all week. Is it heir apparent or hair apparent?
Air.
Air. So the H is silent?
Like air.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I can't wait for that. I can't wait, by the way, for Alexander Rakic against Thiago Santos, Joseph Benavidez against Askar Askarov. We've got Song Yadong, Carlos Ulberg. I mean, there's a lot to like from top to bottom, a slew of great fights, but we are running out of time, so we got to get to the predictions. Yeah. First, I do want to let people know that we want to invite all of you at home to make your fight picks and challenge your friends for a chance to win $5,000 with ESPN's UFC 259 Pick'em game. To play for free, go to ESPN.com/UFC Pick'em and make your picks right now. Chael, I'm going to go into business for myself here. I want to go picks starting with the Cruz fight. Okay, no one told me to do this, but I want to know who you're picking. Cruz, Kenney, who you got?
Dominic Cruz. Hard fight, going to go a decision. They used to call him cruising to a decision as an insult. He is going to cruise. He's going to need all 15 minutes. I'm taking Dom.
I don't remember anyone ever saying that, but I'll take your word for it. Rakic, Santos, who you got?
I believe in this Rakic. I really do. And Santos, when you have a high point in your career, which is arguably the night that he fought John Jones, and one judge even thought that he won, it tends to go down, right? Anything in red hot, just basic biology. If you're red hot, you can only cool off. And I feel that Santos is in a little bit of a cooling period.
Dober, Makhachev.
Great fight, Makhachev. I think that this is going to be a hard one, too. I think Makhachev's going to win all 3 rounds, but I don't think he can get Dober out of there. And I think using those 15 minutes to showcase himself to the world is going to be beneficial in the long run.
Sterling Jan.
Love it, Sterling. But Ariel, we're going to know in the very first round. I'm telling you right now, if Aljo does not win the first round, and by the way, specifically by taking him down, keeping him there, and then doing some kind of damage, I can live with the punches of ground and pound. I can live with the passing of side control, but he must be dominant. If he doesn't do it the first round, forget it. He's not coming back. So
the official pick is Sterling, though?
Absolutely, Sterling.
Fun. Nunes, Anderson.
Amanda Nunes. I think you have a little bit of a different fight, though. I really do. I think that if Megan Anderson can come and use her size, she's 6 feet tall. She has a reach. Many people don't know how to use that. They back down in the locker room. They get scared. The Mike Tyson effect. Anderson Silva used to have this on guys. Now Nunes has it. She's as scary as Cyborg was. Please, excuse me. Megan, come out and fight your fight. Let's find out who's better, but we can only know if you both go out and compete. Ultimately, Ariel, to answer your question, I'm taking Amanda.
Adesanya, Blachowicz.
Izzy Adesanya. And listen, make sure you understand, if somebody tells you that they think that Adesanya is going to win, then that person, by proxy, is telling you they don't think Blachowicz is going to knock him out. And excuse me, you must understand, they call him the Polish hammer for a reason. He only needs 1 punch. So if you say Adesanya is going to win, then you're not only saying is Blachowicz not going to knock him out, you, by example, are stating that Blachowicz isn't going to hit him. So let me spell this out very clearly for you. I am predicting Adesanya wins. Yes, I am predicting Blachowicz does not knock him out. And yes, I understand Blachowicz is 25 minutes, which means ultimately I am predicting that in 25 minutes, Blachowicz does not hit him once.
Once?
Not.
Wow. Geez Louise. Not bad for a guy who, quote unquote, missed weight, as you said earlier in the program. By the way, if you don't come out with excuse me merch at some point in the near future, what a fail by Bad Guy Inc. I mean, I love it. I want to counter where it goes like ding, ding, ding.
Okay.
I love it. I can't get enough of it. I just feel like, I mean, the shirt is ready to be made. Just my opinion.
I think I'm being teased, but I'm not sure.
No,
So
absolutely not.
okay.
Absolutely. I am being as real as it gets, just like you, who claims he wouldn't send back a well-done steak. By the way, I don't believe you. I don't believe
I wouldn't
you.
be happy about it. I talk some trash about the guy, like to the people at my table, but I wouldn't send it back.
What's on the board tonight?
Oh, we got the full gamut of things. We're going to compete with Elizabeth this time. Yeah, we really are, because she's done a good job with pictures. But I have noticed one thing with her pictures. I think like she has helped with lighting, by the way. And I also don't know that her pictures are organic in terms of, I don't think she's passing the tray and snapping a shot and then sending it to the group. I think she does a couple of shots. I think she moves the tray. I started to notice some backdrop, really, in terms of the lighting as it reflected off the counter behind her. I realized she's doing 2 or 3, and she's taking like a best of when she sends it. But we're going to play tonight.
Yeah, I'd go as far as to say I feel like there's a couple of Pinterest pics taken there, just like taking off Pinterest and just kind of saying, hey, look at me.
No. Can I tell you where you're wrong? Because I considered that same thing, but I checked the handwriting. Well, like she went to the gyms and she hand wrote it. I cross-referenced it. That was some. It's her handwriting. She didn't steal the photos, but I also argue it's not her first take.
Interesting. All right. We shall leave it at that, Chael. Great insight as always. Thank you very much to Jon Anik. Thanks to all of you for watching UFC 259. It's the greatest fight of 2021. It's the greatest fight card of 2021. It's stacked from top to bottom. It's 3 title fights, Chael. It's potential history to be made. Enjoy it. ESPN. You're puzzled. And now I have to ask you, why are you puzzled?
Well, why thank Anik's not here? Why thank you to Anik? I'm sitting right here. Thank you to me. Anik's never even going to know you said. Why thank Anik, who left 40 minutes ago? I'm sitting right here.
He might go back and watch. Thank you, Anik.
I'm doing a show with you, Ariel.
And thank you to producer Addison, who I would say.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to me?
You're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. I would say producer Addison upped the production value on today's program. All right, we're out of time. Enjoy the fights. We'll talk to you after.